Hi everyone, I'm Jan Wegener and welcome back to the Early Bird Photo News. I've just returned from a crazy, almost 3 months long road trip covering more than 8,000 miles or over 12,000 kilometers, and I essentially photographed every day for at least 5 or 6 hours and took more than 500,000 photos and videos in the process. So definitely a big trip with a lot of photos and videos still to sort through. And because of this trip, I also haven't been able to post as many news videos, so we got a lot of hot and interesting topics to cover today. And the biggest news is, of course, that I've just launched my brand new website and 2 new editing masterclasses. One for Lightroom and a completely redone from the ground up next generation Photoshop masterclass. If you ask me, improving your editing skills is one of the most impactful ways to improve your overall photography and your happiness along the way. Once you know how to get the best out of your RAW files, editing will go from being a frustrating chore to being a rewarding experience that you actually look forward to and enjoy because now you know how to do it. Both classes are divided up into easy to follow chapters, allowing you to learn at your own pace, and on top of that, I'm providing you with my RAW files that I'm editing in the classes so you can edit right alongside me. The feedback I've gotten so far on the new classes has been phenomenal, and it's great to be able to help so many of you guys to get the editing results you've been wanting for years. There will be no more frustrations or wildly pulling sliders because I will teach you in a step-by-step and structured approach exactly how to do it so you can apply it all to your own images and get fantastic results in no time. So if you want to become skilled and confident when it comes to editing and actually enjoy editing your images, make sure to check out my Lightroom Masterclass and Next Generation Photoshop Masterclass down there in the description, and also let me know what you think about my new website. Now I've been talking so much about image editing, and I actually wish I was already at the editing stage from all the photos and videos from my road trip, but I'm still stuck in the sorting stage somewhere. I've already deleted a few 100,000 photos, but there's still about 100,000 photos to sort through. Now, at first glance, this sounds like a crazy amount of photos, but if you consider that I had been out in the field every day for 5 or 6 hours for 70 days straight, it's not as crazy anymore. It's still a lot of photos, but at the same time, it also means that I had a pretty good time in the field with lots of things to photograph. And it's better to have a lot of photos to sort through than having no photos at all, isn't it? One strategy I've applied when looking through so many images is that I often don't even look at every single file anymore, but rather scroll through the thumbnails and identify a good starting point and a good ending point for a series of images. And then I can already delete all the previous images that don't look quite good. For instance, I can see that the bird is looking away from me for a long time. And then I don't really have to look at any of these images. I simply start looking at the images when it looks back at me and then check those for sharpness rather than scrolling through every single file, because that can definitely take up a lot of your time. I also find it hard to actually pick what images to edit from such a big trip because we had so many incredible moments in the field that it's kind of difficult to pick your favorites and focus on these images first. Of course, there's certain moments that stand out and you will cherish forever and you're inclined to edit these first, like when I had an amazing pair of palm cockatoos displaying right in front of me, or when after 5 days of waiting in the rainforest, the magnificent riflebird finally did a display right in front of us. These are some of the moments that I've already edited because they were very special to me, but there's still hundreds of other moments left where I have to decide, are these worthy of being edited? Am I going to spend my time on these photos, or am I going to focus on some other images? Because I have limited time available these days, I don't really focus on editing every single photo that I've taken or every single species that I've photographed. I rather focus on the truly outstanding moments. And one of those moments was when I was able to photograph the insanely skittish eclectus parrot. And when I say skittish, I really mean it. Although one day, for some reason, a couple birds kind of forgot to fly away. There was 10 or 12 in the tree. Most of them took up, but a couple birds actually stayed back and allowed me a few shots. They were still kind of high up in the tree, but with the 600mm lens and a 2x extender, I was able to get a few shots I was quite happy with. I had many crazy encounters on this trip, like the super tame rumble-pit in Darwin, or the amazing display of a male palm cockatoo drumming at its nest and showing off with its wings wide open, followed by hundreds of finches showing up right in front of us. At some stage, it actually felt overwhelming to witness so many crazy moments in the field, but there's one that definitely stood out to me. On our way home, we stopped at a spot that's known for having quite a good and tame population of the massive southern cassowaries. And there were also reports that there might be a male around with 2 tiny babies, so that's definitely something that I would have loved to witness in the field. Normally when you go to this spot, it's actually not that easy to see a cassowary, but this time around, we pulled into the car park and within 2 minutes we were already right in front of a beautiful female cassowary that was walking up and down the beach literally for hours. Now with these birds, you always have to be a little bit careful. In this spot, they're quite tame and used to people, so they're not really a threat to you, but at the same time, you want to make sure that you're not in its way, because I don't think it would actually stop for you. It would literally just walk right through you. So you can get close, but at the same time, you definitely have to pay attention and make sure that you see what the bird is doing. And whenever it gets too close, you definitely want to get out of its way. So the next few hours until sunset, we were able to follow the cassowary up and down the beach and get some beautiful images of it, which was amazing. But of course, in the back of my mind, I was also thinking, wouldn't it be nice to see the male with the 2 tiny babies? But on that day, that didn't happen. So I had one morning left, the last morning. So I got up at sunrise, walked up and down the beach, didn't see any birds at all. And suddenly I hear a car honking at me and a woman was waving at me. And she was actually a follower from this YouTube channel and recognized me. And she's like, Jan, come over. And she found a male cassowary with 2 babies. And because she knew I was there, she actually drove down the road to get me, picked me up, drove me to the spot with the cassowary and the 2 babies. And then we had an amazing time with 1 male and 2 tiny babies that were walking alongside the road. What followed was an amazing 15 minutes we could spend with the male cassowary and the 2 tiny stripy dinosaur-looking like babies. And they were not bothered by us at all. They were simply doing their little morning walk alongside the road and through the rainforest until eventually they disappeared into the deep dark forest again. And what's interesting about cassowaries as well is that the female basically doesn't care about the eggs or the baby at all. She mates with the male, lays the eggs, and then she says, "Here you go," and takes off. And from there, the eggs and the babies are the responsibility of the male. So he sits on the eggs, he hatches the eggs, and then he takes the babies through the rainforest with him for the next 2 years before they're old enough to actually wander off into the forest themselves. So pretty interesting birds, pretty intimidating, but also pretty amazing at the same time. But enough with the road trip for now. I'll be sharing a lot more stories and photos and videos over the next little while, so make sure to hit that subscribe button to stay up to date and also check out my new website and let me know what you think about it. Just after I left for my road trip, I actually read a crazy rumor on Canon Rumors that sounds too good to be true, but at the same time also makes too much sense for it not to happen. I'm talking about Canon applying for new patents for a 300 to 600 and a 400 to 600mm lens. Now, that by itself doesn't sound that exciting, but when we actually look at the f-stops, it suddenly becomes very exciting. Because these lenses are rumored to go from f2.8 at 300 or 400mm to f4 at 600mm. So essentially combining 2 or 3 of the most popular wildlife lenses in the one lens. You could essentially get a 2.8 400mm lens and an f4 600mm lens all in the one lens. Now that would be quite something, wouldn't it? If you ask me, I'd call that as close to a must-have lens as possible for all nature and wildlife photographers. Would you agree? And the more I think about a lens like this, the more I think it actually makes sense for Canon to make one. First of all, they have already shown the willingness to replace high-end prime lenses with high-end zoom lenses. So for instance, they made a 100 to 300 f2.8 lens instead of making an RF 2.8 300mm prime lens. So there's one high-end zoom lens replacing a prime lens already. And then we also have the rumor that Canon is making a 200 to 500mm f4 lens, even though it has gotten a little bit quiet on that front, but Canon rumor at least thinks that this lens will definitely still come. So there's potentially 2 high-end zoom lenses already replacing prime lenses. The other reason I think it might be quite likely that we will see a lens like this is that it would simply get a lot more people to upgrade from their current gear or to jump ship from like Sony or Nikon, because a lens like that would be truly unique and very useful in the field. How often have you wished that you could simply zoom out a little bit more or zoom in a little bit more or open up your aperture a little bit more? And with a lens like this, you could actually do all these things and still hopefully have nice prime lens quality and still be able to use teleconverters as well. So that would truly be a do-it-all wildlife lens. Of course, the price tag would probably be eye-watering, but at the same time, I feel like this lens simply makes so much sense that Canon will eventually do it, because the sales for such a lens should be substantially higher compared to Canon simply releasing like a version 2 of their current 400 and 600mm RF lenses. Then a few people would upgrade, whereas with a lens like this new zoom lens, I think a lot more people would be very inclined to upgrade their current gear, because it could be a truly game-changing lens in the field. Would you agree? Is that a lens that you would be interested in? I know for myself, I would definitely consider it a must-have lens for wildlife and bird photography. When it comes to editing high ISO files from the R5 Mark II, it's not always an easy task, and I'll definitely make a separate video about it, how to get the best results from these files. But for now, it's great to see that basically all the major programs have now updated and are supporting the R5 Mark II. I've also linked for you a few high ISO files down there in the description that you can download that will hopefully help you to play around and test out the different programs and see what I'm talking about. And I've also negotiated a special deal with DXO for you guys. I've linked a code down there for you in the description, and from tomorrow, the 27th of September, if you use that code, you will get a 15% discount side-wide on all products on the DXO website. So if you want DXO PureRAW 4, DXO PhotoLab 8, or the Nik collection that I used on almost all my images, and also show you my new masterclasses how to use it, now might be the time to download the trial, or actually download the product and then use my code to get a special discount. I don't think you can actually get a 15% discount anywhere else at the moment. So if you're interested in getting some of these DXO products, now might be the time. Now, I told you before that I did this really long road trip, but this was only partially true, because as part of this road trip, I was also flying to different destinations. I flew from Cairns to Darwin, for instance, and then from Darwin to a few other smaller destinations. And as you know, air travel can always be quite a pain in your behind, because traveling with the big lenses and big backpacks is always quite difficult, especially when it comes to traveling domestically and on smaller planes. And this time around, I was able to test out my Naya Evo Fjord 60-liter backpack, and it actually helped me tremendously to travel on these airplanes. First of all, I was able to get my big 600mm lens in there, 2 R5 Mark II bodies, 2 smaller lenses, and also all my drone batteries, as well as my MacBook Pro. So definitely not a light backpack, and it was all around about 15 kilos. But because of the style and the design of the backpack, no one actually even ever asked me about the backpack, because it simply just looked quite nice and small, and it even fit into the smaller overhead storage of the smaller airplanes that flew from like Darwin to Connemara, for instance. So all in all, I was very impressed how the backpack worked on the airplane, but also in the field, because in the field I can stick my 600mm lens with an attached R5 into that backpack and have a 100 to 500mm lens on the side, for instance. So all in all, I owed you an update how the travel is with that backpack, but it basically passed with flying colors, and I was very impressed by it, and it's definitely made it so much easier to travel. And of all the backpacks I've used in the past, and I've definitely done a few, this is probably my favorite one to travel with, simply because no one actually suspected that it was that heavy simply by the way it looked on my back. Sometimes people look at your pack and I think, oh, that's definitely way too heavy. Whereas with this backpack, I had no issues at all. And if you want to get yourself a Naya Evo backpack, I also have a special discount code for you down there in the description. And if you're looking at that side, make sure to check out some of these awesome little pouches as well that are very nice for storing away things when traveling. While I was away, Canon has also released a few new lenses, and one in particular was quite interesting for me for filming, a 28 to 70mm f2.8 STM lens. So it's not an L lens, which means it comes with a smaller price tag, but at the same time, it should still be quite capable. Most of the time I'm filming with a 24-105 lens, but that is actually an f4 lens. So having a lens that I can open up to f2.8 would definitely be helpful in certain situations. So I'm very tempted to add that lens to my bag and see how it performs when it comes to filming myself in the studio or in the field. Speaking about Canon, I should also be able to get my hands on an R1 over the next few weeks, and it will actually be really interesting to see what this camera will be like. At the moment, I haven't pre-ordered one because of the 24 megapixels. I simply didn't feel like that's enough for me in the field. But at the same time, I'm really looking forward to trying out this camera and in particular testing out what the dynamic range will be like and the autofocus compared to the R5 Mark II. And maybe, just maybe, at the end of that video, I may be swayed to order one myself. So for now, we'll have to wait and see, but I'm definitely looking forward to making that video for you guys and testing out the R1 in the field. And since Canon thinks one can never ever have enough 24 megapixel cameras, it seems like they're actively working also on releasing an R6 Mark III with a stacked 24 megapixel sensor that is probably the one from the current R3. Now, while I wasn't too excited about having more 24 megapixel cameras, I'm actually kind of tempted by an R6 Mark III if it has nice video features, because currently I'm mainly filming with an R3, but if the R6 Mark III has similar features to the R3, in particular better video autofocus and also 4K 120 frames per second for instance, I could be very tempted by an R6 Mark III simply because it would be smaller and lighter, and it would also share the same batteries that we can find in the R5 Mark II most likely, so it could help me in the field to pack a little bit lighter and not have to take like extra batteries and extra charges. So in that regard, I'm actually quite interested in the R6 Mark III. And since the R6 series is Canon's most popular series or one of the best selling cameras, it definitely makes sense for Canon also to keep that camera updated on a shorter cycle, namely being like 2 or 2.5 years, because there's competition like the Nikon Z6 III, for instance, that definitely push the envelope a little bit. So for the R6 Mark III to come out and kind of leapfrog that Z6 III again would make a lot of sense when it comes to Canon and their sales. Would you be interested in an R6 Mark III? I know from my perspective, it's actually the most interesting R6 series camera, but I'd love to hear from you guys. I know many of you guys use the R6 Mark II, so do you feel like it's already worthwhile to upgrade that camera, or are you happy with it for now and say I might just wait and see? There haven't been too many news when it comes to wildlife photography and Sony and Nikon while I was away, but there's one camera in particular I'm definitely looking forward to trying out when it eventually be launched, and that is the Sony A1 Mark II. Because I think Sony will definitely be putting some amazing cutting-edge technology into that camera, but so far we're only hearing crickets, so we'll have to wait a little bit longer to see what that camera will actually be like. When it comes to Nikon, there's also not many news, but I will be taking out the Nikon Z8 or Z6 III over the next little while with the 800mm PF lens, because of all the big Nikon lenses, that's the one I have used the least, and I've never actually made a video about this lens. On paper at least, having a small light lens that has the reach of 800mm should definitely be very cool, but I'll have to wait and see how I feel about this lens after using it a little bit more extensively in the field, and of course I'll be sharing all my findings with you in another video. So I better get back to deleting some more images from my road trip editing this news video. And while I do that, I would love to hear from you guys all your thoughts in the comments, and would also appreciate it if you checked out my new website, my new masterclasses, and let me know all about it. And of course, hit that like button and the subscribe button, and I will see you guys in another video very soon. Bye!